Okay, so in this video we're going to do a real quick rundown of Rstudio, a statistical software package, program, whatever you want to call it, that I'd say really is, I don't know if cutting edge is the right term, but this is, I'd say, a direction that our field is definitely heading, and social sciences in general. This is a software package that a lot of sciences use and a lot of industries and jobs use. One strong advantage of it is that it is free and open source, right? Meaning that people are able to see all the code and whatnot that goes into this, and they don't have to pay for it. And so it really removes barriers in that way. And there's a really strong online and academic community of people that develop tools for Rstudio and also use it for research and various other applications. And so once again, I'm not making this with the goal that you'll come out of this as an expert on Rstudio or maybe even necessarily able to use it, but I at least wanted to introduce you to it, and make it a little bit familiar, hopefully so that if there comes a point where you want to use this or need to use this, it won't be quite as intimidating or foreign. And so this is an example of what the user interface looks like. If you just downloaded it today and then pulled it open, it wouldn't quite look like this because I've customized this a little bit from default. But the general principle and concepts are still the same. So we have four kind of windows or quadrants here. And in the top left, we have this section here, which is our script, right? And so this is the piece that we actually type into. So you can see here, I can say, hi students, right? I can do that. I'm going to delete that because it'll see there's a little X there. It's telling us something's wrong. But this is what we type into. That's our script, right? And so you can have different script files that it's kind of like different documents, like if you use Microsoft Word or something like that. Basically different files that we've typed our code into to help us do various things, right? And so, yeah, so we can have different scripts here. I'll come back to that. Down here we have our console. And so this kind of is like, if you use command prompt on Windows or anything like that, this is kind of similar to that. Basically, if Rstudio is using R, which is essentially it's sort of an advanced calculator, then you can kind of think of the script as the actual like keys on your calculator, right? It's where you're typing the actual commands for your calculator to do its calculations. Then the console is sort of like the little screen on your calculator that's kicking out the results, right? So if you type 6 times 8, then it'll show on the screen, it'll say 48, right? Because it'll do that calculation for you. That's essentially what the console is, right? Or you can think of this as our input and this console as our output, right? So we'll type things in here and then our console will show us the results, or if there are errors, if there are issues, it'll tell us that. A couple other things, our environment here, this generally speaking is where objects will be housed. So as we use the console, or as we use our scripts, run our commands, we can build different objects, right? And essentially what we're doing then is we're creating things using our script, and then we might do further calculations using those things, right? So for example, if I wanted to create a variable, or say I had a bunch of different scores on something and I wanted to create an average of those scores, I could do that and it would appear as an object. And then through that, I could maybe do other calculations with that specific average score variable. Just kind of one basic example there. But generally speaking, we'll create objects and those will appear here. Right now it's empty because we haven't done anything. Down here on the bottom, we have a lot of things. We have our files. So if we want to access files, just like we would on our computer, we have plots. So if I wanted to make graphs or figures that would appear here, if I wanted to load different packages, I can do that here. And a package, basically, it's kind of like an update or an extension of the software in Rstudio. So in other words, if this is an advanced calculator, packages are essentially bits of code that help our calculator do things it couldn't do before. Or like I remember when I was a student in high school, I had to buy a really expensive graphing calculator, and some people would have different games that you could play on them, and we would have to hook up our calculators and download the games from each other. And you can kind of think of packages in a similar way, in that it's information that we have to download, And when we do that, it will help us to do things that we couldn't do before. And then some other things over here as well, which we won't get into, to keep it short. So I'll just do a quick example here. This is some data that, or so a script and some data that I used in a class that I taught at a previous institution. And so you can see here, this right here is a Excel CSV file. That's a specific type of file format, but basically it just looks like any other spreadsheet at first glance. And so you can see we have 5 columns here with different variables: safety, interests, performance, sleep, clarity, and org sup, which stands for organizational support. And you can see these numbers don't make a lot of sense because this is simulated data that it's not actual real data that we collected. So it looks a bit different than data we might typically see. But just an example of what this looks like in Excel. And then in Rstudio, we will essentially tell it to access that file and use that information. So in our script here, I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty of what all this means. But in a basic sense, when we're using programs like this, we'll type out some script and then we'll tell it to run the script. So in other words, if we're developing a command by typing it out, and then when we run it, we're telling it to actually follow through and execute that command. And so I have all this typed out here. Install package. Yeah, I already have that package installed, but we did it anyway. Load the package. So now I'm saying, okay, I want to use that. Our box is checked now for Levon, so it's saying, okay, we're using that. I want to clean things up. If I had a bunch of stuff here, it would have been clean now. Set the working directory. So I'm telling it where to find this file right here in my file system, and you can see I already did that. So we'll run, and then I want to import the data, and there we have it. And so that's an example of creating an object. So I wanted to create something called path lecture. The reason it's called that, this is for, or it was originally for, a lecture video about path analysis, a specific kind of multivariate statistical analysis. And I wanted to create that by following this command here, which again, sparing some detail. Basically, I was saying I need you to read a CSV file, and that file is called pathlecture.csv. That's what it's saved as. Then I had some other information here that is a little more technical that we need to get into. But by doing that, I created an object called pathlecture, which is our data, right? And so you can see if I click this button, I can see the data here. Right, so yeah, we can see safety, interest, performance, sleep, clarity, work sup. Same thing over here, right? And then essentially what we can do from there is we can run different things, right? So now I'm telling it to show me the names of those columns. I want to see just the first few rows in each of the columns. Yeah, let's do a summary of the data. So now we can see, okay, we have these variables, we have the minimum, we have the maximum, we have the mean, right? Just some examples of what we can do with this. And so I'll do one more for fun. How's that? Yeah, so you can see as we do more complex analyses, now it's kicking out more and more output because the more sophisticated our analysis, essentially the more things are happening, and therefore the more things there are to understand and pay attention to. Or the more things it will tell us about what we just conducted. And so again, I won't go any further than that just for the sake of not overwhelming you. But yeah, essentially just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of what this program is and what it's like to work with it. Once again, something that I wouldn't be surprised if you see at some point in your career. So hopefully this at least gives you a sense of what it's all about. We'll see you next time.